different than all the rest. I'm quite old-fashioned, wear a hat, sometimes play chess. And when I'm out, I'm looking for that vintage fling. But all complexions that I adore.
Please hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon to be informed when we release new content. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank God for tea. What would the world do without tea? How did it exist? I'm glad I wasn't born before tea. Reverend Sidney Smith.
But indeed, I'd rather have nothing but tea. Mansfield Park, Jane Austen.
The dust had all fled from the surfaces of the tables and shelves beneath the disapproving gaze of the golden Pixie, if only for a short while. The presence of dust at her tea party would not be tolerated, and so the dust had slunk from the little house, loitering just outside the door for the right moment to once again inhabit the corners and ledges within, without being observed by her sharp eye. The current cleanliness of her surfaces meant it was the perfect time to go shopping for the ingredients required to create a fanciful array of treats to offer the invited guests of the Vintage Ladies' Tea, and so we did. It had previously been decided during the planning stage for the tea that as a thank you for our guests spending an afternoon with us, we would make small floral arrangements in vintage sherbet cups that reflected both the season and the Pixies' fanciful creativity. And by happy coincidence, Trader Joe's was selling all the Pixies' favorite flowers and everything that they had imagined for their creations, though if truth were told, they only knew this because it was the first place they had run across that carried any floral stems at all. Nonetheless, they were enchanted by all the choices, and it quickly became clear that there would need to be hard limits set if we were to leave the store with less than every bloom and branch within its walls. After a relentless search for the perfect combination of greens, roses, and complementary stems, we cleverly managed to leave with our ideal combination, while still leaving a few flowers for others as well. And all we needed now was to procure a few sherbet cups, which clearly meant making a trip to our favorite second-hand store, where there is almost always a wonderful selection of vintage glassware, having been rejected by their owners, just waiting to be adopted and given new purpose. As you know, the Pixies are just the people to give all the lost things a second chance to shine. 6 little glass dishes and a couple absolutely positively necessary extras later, we headed home. Back in the little house, the Pixies and their helpers tied on their aprons and set about whipping up a whimsical feast befitting of royalty or a small hungry army. Since one of us is incapable of doing anything by halves, the Pixies have been trained over the years to anticipate feeding an unexpected and famished horde at any given meal, which means we often have enough leftovers for a day or several, leaving us more time to do other things. Locating silver linings in almost any scenario has become my expertise. Almost everything sprung to life from between the pages of the old books which had been happily awaiting this exact moment, finding their usefulness again at the hands of the Pixies Two. An exception to this was the coronation chicken salad. This chicken salad was inspired by Queen Elizabeth II's coronation hot salad, with perhaps a few liberties taken with the ingredients. Since the original recipe is rumored to be its own variation of Jubilee chicken served for King George V's Silver Jubilee, and since none of the original partakers would be present at the Pixies Ladies' Tea to comment on the difference, it didn't seem too presumptuous to add our own tiny flair to the preparation of the deliciously versatile dish that can be spread on tea sandwiches, served as a side dish, or stand its own ground alone atop a bed of salad greens or rice. We began by simmering whole organic chickens in a pot, filled with carrots and celery. I am allowed that one celery rib, if you remember correctly from the great celery negotiation of 2023. I may have snuck a few extras in the pot when the Pixies' heads were turned, with no one the wiser until they view this video, of course. Also to the pot was added 2 cups of strong Earl Grey tea, cinnamon, onion, thyme, peppercorns, and a bay leaf or 2. When the chicken was cooked through and cooled, it was chopped and combined with mayonnaise, sour cream, diced dried apricots, and apricot jam, chopped walnuts, salt, pepper, and curry powder, and then it was tasted for correcting the seasonings. The entire combination was divine, and easily would have been at home served in a palace to royal audiences. With the majority of the food finally ready, it was time to set the table and create small floral arrangements. The Pixies consulted their vintage books to confirm the appropriate table settings for their tea/luncheon and went to work laying a table that would make Alice comfortable and delight a particular crazed hatter. Was gathered and placed in pots while water was percolated and poured carefully over the aged leaves and left to brew for approximately 6 minutes, allowing for a strong cup of tea, ideal for a splash of cream. Scones were prepared fresh and pulled from the oven just before the guests began to arrive, and dishes were filled with homemade clotted cream and a variety of jams made earlier and a delightful lemon curd. Little sandwiches, made by the Golden Pixie and her sous chefs, were arranged on plates, while little cakes got dressed in chocolate buttercream jackets for the occasion. Tiny quiches filled with sautéed mushrooms and tarragon from the Pixies' potager accompanied Cinderella pumpkin muffins to the bountiful buffet, and just like that, the party was set to commence. And while it may sound like things came together with the greatest of ease, that simply couldn't be further from the truth. Chaos had been lurking about the kitchen for some time, looking for a place to settle, but alas, every surface was already occupied by industry, and so there was confusingly no place for it to find rest. But chaos could not be allowed to spoil the fun. So, after weeks of preparation, the guests arrived and the long-awaited and planned-for party commenced in earnest. And what a lovely party it was, with old friends and new ones coming together to while away a few hours on a pixelated, idyllic afternoon, saturated with good company, freely flowing tea, and food prepared with intentionality. I suspect that had Queen Catherine of Braganza, wife of King Charles II, and the first on record to throw a tea party, attended the Pixies' tea, she would have given them the royal nod of approval. And I'm sure we can all agree that we're glad the infamous colonial unpleasantness that saw crates of tea hoisted into a particular moonlit bay by angry citizens, soon to be independent of the crown and looking for representation equal to taxation, did not put a permanent damper on the consumption of tea in the U.S. Perish the thought. Tea, as I'm sure you're aware, has a way of calming the heart and mind, whether it is in the simple ritualistic preparation or in the rich soothing beverage itself. There is, at once, something both exceptional and comfortably routine about a cup of tea. And when that tea is combined with good friends and family, delightful culinary offerings, interesting conversation, white linens, fine china, and general fanciness, what's not to fall madly in love with? Perhaps the Hatter was not so mad after all. Perhaps he simply never wanted to be compelled to leave the tea party and commence his haberdashing once again. And who could blame him? But alas, every fancy party must give way to real life once again, and it is no exception for the Pixies Two. But there is a strange change that occurs after one has had their fill, if that's possible, of tea and visiting. A sort of refreshing has occurred, and the old bothersome situations seem a bit less important. Perhaps one of the most important things one can learn outside of essential skills, or even alongside them, is how to refresh one's spirit and the spirit of others. The act of gathering together to refresh is not a trivial or frivolous thing, though it definitely can be a fancy one. And while we in the little house are of a mind that true rejuvenation of the heart occurs when one spends time in the presence of God, there is something immeasurably important about fellowship with others. The ultimate old book clearly puts importance on taking time to feast, celebrate, and reflect on the goodness of God in our everyday mundane moments, as well as the miraculous events in our life. And sometimes that looks like a tea party, where everyone involved shakes off their tightly wound routine and spends a few golden hours in that suspended time between realities of the real world. I believe the Golden Pixie was right when her list of projects to take on only consisted of first and foremost a tea party. We want to thank the beautiful friends who joined us in celebrating an ordinary day and delighted us with their conversation and company. We hope you have enjoyed our video and will consider liking it, commenting, and if you haven't already, subscribing to our channel. All these things help us to continue to grow. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Now go forth and pour yourself a cup of tea and grab a biscuit or tiny cake. We'll see you next time.
In the sweetness of friendships, let there be laughter and sharing of pleasures. For in the dew of little things, the heart finds its morning and is refreshed. Khalil Gibran.